time at the end for Q&A. And you should have access to the Q&A feature in Zoom, so feel free to throw feedback and questions in there as we go through the presentation, but know that we won't be addressing those items until after the presentation. So a bit about the project background. In 2020, the City of Eugene applied for and received a Safe Routes to School grant to help make Howard Avenue a more comfortable place to walk and bike. In 2021, city staff began community outreach to help inform the new design for Howard. So that included 3 online open houses and 1 community survey. In 2022, last year, the project was put on hold. City realized the Safe Routes to School grant would not be able to cover all of the changes that were being suggested for Howard. Now, here we are in 2023. The project is once again moving forward. Yay, so excited. The city has identified additional funds to help realize that full scope of Howard changes, and it's those changes that I'm here to talk with you about today. Oops, just skipped all my slides. Okay, here we go, back on track. So this is an aerial photo of Howard with North Park on the left and River Road on the right. The original Safe Routes to School grant covered just the portion of Howard in that yellow box. Now that there are additional funds available to make the changes the community suggested, the project area has been extended to include all of Howard Avenue west of River Road, so that blue box. I'll also note here that Howard Avenue between North Park and River Road is owned by Lane County, though it's maintained by the City of Eugene. And as part of this project, ownership and responsibility for Howard Avenue will be transferred from Lane County to City of Eugene. We'll touch more on that later in the presentation though. So now let's talk about street design and uses. So currently the east side of Howard, part closer to River Road, looks a lot like the picture on the screen. So that's got 2 about 10-foot wide vehicle travel lanes and 2 about 4-foot wide shoulders. The side of Howard closer to North Park looks a little different, more like this picture. So that portion of Howard has, again, 2 about 10-foot wide vehicle travel lanes, a 4-foot-ish shoulder on the north side, and then a really nice 10-foot wide sidewalk on the south side that runs adjacent to both Kelly Middle School and Howard Elementary School. But what's less obvious from those 2 previous pictures is how Howard is used. So let's talk about uses. Well, we know that people drive on Howard. We also know the speed limit is 25 miles per hour, but that most people go over that, and some people go quite a bit over that. And that's from a speed study that was conducted by the county in 2018. We also know that some people park on Howard. Some people wait for and ride the bus on Howard, because fun fact, there's 6 Lane Transit District bus stops on Howard. We also know that people, kids, adults, seniors, walk and bike on Howard. Some of these kids may be the 500 students enrolled in Howard Elementary School or the 425 students enrolled in Kelly Middle School last year. It's a lot of kiddos, some of which are in these photos. In addition to people driving, parking, busing, walking, riding on Howard, we also know that a lot of people live on Howard. Lastly, we know that there are cats that cross Howard, so be sure to slow for mittens. And I know this is kind of a funny slide, but I think it helps highlight that, you know, Howard is a neighborhood street and has so many more uses than might meet the eye, other than, you know, just for people driving. So we just went over the current conditions and uses of Howard, and now I want to share some of the community input and perspective that was gathered about Howard in 2021. So in late 2021, there was a survey that asked a handful of questions, including the one on the slide, which is, what concerns do you have with the existing conditions of Howard Avenue? And the top 4 concerns, so those tallest bars on the right side of the screen, were about lack of safe places to walk and bike, as well as concerns about speeding drivers and driver behavior. And at the same time that survey was available, a handful of draft designs for what Howard Avenue could be like were also shared. So these designs were shown at online open houses and were available on the project webpage as well. And all of these designs focused on providing a protected walking and biking space on Howard. The designs differed in how they divided space between vehicles and people walking and biking and how wide they were overall. Because to add a protected walking and biking space, we will have to add additional pavement or asphalt. I'll note that the draft designs here were not the only designs that were shared. I can just only fit so many on this slide. And when asked about the idea of creating a shared walking and biking space on Howard, most people responded very positively. They were in support. That's not to say that everyone loved it, right? There were a few people who disliked the idea. But additionally, we heard a lot of concerns about speeding and traffic, and that just creating that protected walking and biking space isn't good enough. It's still not going to be a safe enough place. So after hearing the community feedback and tapping into more funding, we took a closer look at Howard and asked questions like, how much public right-of-way width do we have? What's the right balance between paved width and feeling like we're intruding into people's front yards? Because even though that space may be public right-of-way, it doesn't always feel like that. Do the future widths align with our street design guidelines? Are we meeting our own standards for these things? Can lane transit district and school buses still safely navigate the streets? Those are big vehicles that need to get through. Can we add speed cushion along all of Howard, not just by the schools? Can we upgrade street lights to be more energy efficient with LEDs? How will we handle stormwater? How can we best preserve the beautiful trees that are out there? We also ask questions like, well, where will trash cans go? We're designing a street, but that's one of the uses. People set their trash cans out there. People have to go get their mail out there. Can we stripe crosswalks? Well, which ones? What kind of striping? Should we also add signage? How wide exactly should a concrete barrier be between kids walking and people driving? Is it 12 inches, 16 inches? It all adds up. Even the width of those painted stripes on the travel lanes adds up. And I get that this sounds a little exacting, but this is kind of the process of designing a street to work for more people. Are we going to have to move all the utility poles out there? Yikes, hopefully not. And, just so many other questions. And all of these questions help us inform a design that, hopefully reflects the community's desire for a safer walking and biking space, as well as slowing people driving down. So what we heard in that survey. And so here on this slide is the draft street design between where the sidewalk ends near Howard Elementary School, almost to River Road as it stands today. And I'm going to go over this whole slide kind of step by step. So starting from the left side of the screen, which is the north side of the street opposite the two schools, we have 2 feet of paved shoulder. And this added space helps extend the life of the roadway so that that edge isn't quite as stable as the rest of the road and can be the first part to kind of crumble. So we don't want it to be uber close to where cars are driving every day. And then adjacent to that, we have 2 standard 10-foot wide travel lanes with a foot of width for striping between them. That striping will actually be yellow, but the program that I made this design in, doesn't have a yellow striping option. So it shows up as white, it'll be yellow. Next, there's a standard 1-foot buffer between the concrete barrier and that driving lane. And then we get to the concrete barrier itself. So we're budgeting 1.5 feet for that, so 18 inches. And then lastly, we have 9 feet of protected walking and biking space on the south side of Howard. So that'll connect into the current sidewalk that runs adjacent to Kelly Middle School and Howard Elementary School. And this is where people can walk, jog, ride a bike, be on roller skates, have their dog, just be separated and protected from vehicles driving on Howard. And not pictured in this graphic, but included in the design are speed cushions from North Park Avenue to River Road. And speed cushions are preferred to speed humps because Howard is considered a neighborhood collector street. So kind of one up from that local street. And generally we expect to see more emergency vehicles using neighborhood collector streets, and speed cushions don't slow emergency vehicles down because those vehicles are wide enough to straddle the cushions. Passenger vehicles are not able to fully straddle speed cushions the way a fire engine or other emergency vehicle can. So if you add all of those numbers on this slide up, it puts us at 35.5 feet of pavement currently. There's about 30 feet of pavement on Howard. And you can't see how tall I am, but I'm about 5'6". So we would be adding about one of me pavement wise. So 5.5 feet of additional pavement on Howard. And likely most of this would be added to the south side of Howard, allowing us to avoid utility poles and a lot of really large trees. And I want to note here that this design may shift in select locations as we dig into the nitty-gritty on Howard. So where exactly does that property line extend to? Where are we really tight on parking? And if we find we have more functional wiggle room in the space than we thought, we can look at adding space to that protected walking biking area, as well as maybe a north side shoulder, which some westbound bicyclists might like to use. If we find we have less space than we thought we would, we need to shrink the design in certain areas. So that could look like changing that 2 feet of paved shoulder on the north side to just a foot, seeing if we can build a concrete barrier that's only a foot wide instead of a 1.5 feet, or taking some space away from people and kids walking and biking. And I don't have the full right-of-way survey back yet. And what we see in that survey will inform the final width of some of these features on the slide. And I'll note that this design will transition as we get closer to River Road, where Howard Avenue widens and we need to go from the path back up to a sidewalk at that intersection with the curb ramps. And I recognize that it can be tricky to visualize what this space might look like just from this graphic, right? It's a cartoon, it's not real life. So I have a couple more photos to share on the next slide. Okay, so this is Northeast 60th Avenue in Portland, Oregon. And you can see in the 2019 photo at the top of the slide that the street looked a lot like Howard does now. There's even less of a shoulder in the case of 60th. And in the 2021 photo, you can see that there's a protected walking area that's been added to just one side of the street. And you can just barely make out the speed cushions in the background that were added as well. And here's a few more photos of that same project in Portland that show how the cars travel outside of that protected space. And some photos of how driveway access is maintained along 60th. There's simply a break in that protected space that allows people to back their trailers in, pull their cars in, navigate, etc. Here's a photo that shows, what a crosswalk on Northeast 60th looks like. So you see the yellow truncated domes. We see the white striping there, letting people know this is a crossing point. And then one last photo of Northeast 60th that shows the protected space in use. So there's someone walking there. And I'll add that Portland's protected space is intended for pedestrians only. So it's 6 feet wide, smaller than our standard shared use minimum path width of 8 feet. The width of Portland's concrete curb that's been in all these photos is 18 inches, 1.5 feet. So the same as in our current draft design. And I'll wrap up kind of that design conversation by showing that draft design for Howard again. We can always come back to this slide. I know there's a lot of information on it. But now I'm going to share some information about our timeline. So July 2023, where we are now. So August 2023, we're having 2 community meetings to get final feedback on the design of Howard. So both of them this week. One later this week is the in-person meeting at the Howard Elementary School cafeteria. Please come to that as well if you want. But in addition to those community meetings, we'll also be out doing one-on-one site review meetings with Howard neighbors who might be more impacted by some of these designs or have really specific questions. August 23 to January of 2024, that's when a lot of the engineering takes place. So taking our draft street design, that cartoon I showed you guys, and actually turning it into a building plan set. April 2024 to May 2024, project goes to bid. Hopefully those bids come back within budget, and then we finalize the contract with the builder. July 2024 to August 2024, when construction is planned. So trying to avoid times when school is in session and having this built before the kiddos come back. And then simultaneously going on with everything else I just mentioned from now until April 2024 is the transfer of public right-of-way ownership from Lane County to the city of Eugene. So again, Howard Avenue between North Park and River Road is currently owned by Lane County. As part of the Howard Avenue project, Lane County and the city of Eugene have agreed to transfer ownership of Howard Avenue to the city. And the purpose of transferring ownership of public right-of-way is to provide for better continuity of services, such as traffic enforcement, infrastructure operations, maintenance, and planning. And then that transfer of ownership and proposed annexation that follows applies to the public street right-of-way only. It will not require properties along either side of Howard Avenue to annex. Annexation of private property is on a voluntary basis. Community members living along Howard can expect to receive mailers from the city about the transfer and annexation of the public right-of-way adjacent to their property. So more to come on that in your mail. And now we're at the feedback and Q&A portion of this meeting. I think I promised we'd be under 20 minutes and we're at 12:19 now, so check. And I'll note that I may not be able to answer all of your questions right here and right now, especially if they are super specific, but I'm happy to follow up with you later if you email me or we exchange contact information. I'm hoping Willow can drop my contact info in the Zoom chat box somewhere, along with the webpage for the Engage Eugene website for Howard Avenue. But now I'm going to go ahead and close my slides and take a peek at the Q&A box to see if there's anything in there we can start with. Willow, do let me know if I've missed anything here, though.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that folks can open up that Q&A box and type a question in. There's also a raise hand feature down in the bottom menu. So if anybody wants to select the raise hand feature and ask a question, they can do that. Just select the feature and then I will basically promote you to be able to ask a question.
Thanks, Willow. I knew there was something else. Okay, I see one question in the Q&A. Mariah, hopefully I'm saying that right, is asking how high is the barrier going to be? So I believe the concrete barrier, if we continue to follow Portland's example, is either 4 or 6 inches. So about the height of a curb you would see like on a normal city sidewalk. Good question though. Let's see if there's any others.
Looks like there's also a question that was put into the chat box. So there's a webinar chat as well that folks can access.
Oh, nice.
And that's where I'll put Catherine's contact info and the Engage Eugene page link.
Awesome. Well, I see one other question came through here. Will property owners be charged for any of these improvements? This is from Kiva. And will property taxes increase as a result? So your property taxes should not increase. This isn't related to, if your property is Lane County property or City of Eugene property. And I will say that the funding for this project is from two sources. One source is the Safe Routes to School grant that was applied for in 2020. And the other source is from a pool of funds that are the city's transportation system development charges. So those are the two pots we're pulling from here. Let me look in the chat to see if there's some questions. Okay, from Christine. Is there any way to add stop signs to keep so much traffic from using Howard versus Maxwell? So Christine, that's a good question. I don't think we're looking at adding any stop signs, but with the speed cushions that would go in as part of this project, I think it'll make using Howard like as an alternative to Maxwell a lot less appealing to folks. So I would expect that traffic volumes might drop because of that. Good question though. Okay, back to the Q&A here. Another question from Mariah asking how many of these heritage trees are estimated to be removed. So Mariah, when I walked Howard Avenue a couple weeks ago, looking specifically like at the south side, which is where we're likely to add that additional asphalt, I saw two medium-sized trees that I thought, you know, would be in the way and we would have to remove. I don't know if the heritage trees is like a specific designation, or if when you mean heritage trees, you just mean like the really old, beautiful overarching trees. But I did see two medium trees that I thought would need to be removed in order to add this walking and biking space. Let's see, these are good questions, guys. And I'm not seeing any hands up. Are you, Willow? No. Okay. And again, I'll note, I went over a lot of information really quickly. So if you're kind of like letting this digest and you're thinking about it and you come up with a question later, you're welcome to call or email me. Email is generally best because I work from home a couple days a week, as I am now. So don't always have access to my office phone. But if you can always leave a message on my office phone, it just might take a day or two to get back to you.
And it looks like John has a question that he's typing up. So same goes for anybody in the chat right now. If you just need a few minutes to sort of gather your thoughts and ask a question, feel free to take your time. We can sort of hang out and wait.
Yeah. Okay. And looks like John was able to get that question added. And John said the original Safe Routes to School grant discussed at the last community meeting allowed for $310,000 total budget for construction. Do we have an estimate of additional funds the city will provide for the project applied to the construction budget, or total estimate of total construction budget to apply to the project? Yes, I do have an estimate. I need to pull it up because I don't recall the number off the top of my head. But the numbers I have, so in August of 2020, when we were applied for that original Safe Routes to School grant, it looks like the budget was about $560,000. So that would cover a little bit of sidewalk near River Road, as well as the protected walking biking space. So it was August 2020. In June 2022, so a couple of years later, when we scoped the project again, we found that the costs were a lot higher, about $930,000. And there's a couple of reasons that those costs increased by so much, because I was really surprised to see that number. One of which is, we decided adding speed cushions was a neighborhood priority. So that increased the cost. But also we've just seen a lot of construction costs go up in general across the board on all projects. So mobilization costs have tripled in some cases, and that's just the cost of like getting a crew out there to do the actual work. We've also seen materials cost increase. So the cost of striping has doubled. The cost of concrete traffic separators has gone up, just like as a per unit cost. We're not looking to add more of those than we were originally, but stuff just costs more. And let's see if there was anything else. And if I answered that question fully. I think I did, but John, let me know if there was anything else. Okay, Mariah, will the streetlights be designed to limit dark sky interference? So that's a good question. There are existing streetlights on Howard. I think it would just be simply upgrading those to LED lights, which are more efficient. And I don't think there would be any other changes there. And some of them may already be LEDs. I'm not totally sure. But it's kind of one of those things, like if we're out there already doing that work, we should go ahead and look at upgrading the lights as well. Again, like I said, those mobilization costs are really high. So the more we can bundle things, usually the better off we are. It's just more efficient from a cost perspective. Let's see. Okay, those are all the questions in the Q&A I'm seeing right now. The webinar chat, not seeing any other questions. And I don't see any hands raised. Oh, okay, John, I see you got one more question coming. We'll hang on. We budgeted a lot of time for this meeting, so Will and I are happy to stay here. But if you do feel like you got what you needed, you're free to go. We'll try to get this video posted in the next day or two to the Howard Avenue Engage Eugene webpage, which is likely where you found this link. So I'm thinking you might know where it is. And Mariah, you're very welcome for the Zoom.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like a few people sort of popped in late. So I put the link to the live YouTube in the chat. So if anyone who came in late wants to check out the link there, they're welcome to.
Great. Thank you, Willow. Okay, so another question from John says, you indicated the project will include speed bumps similar to Park to reduce traffic speed and hopefully encourage some vehicles to use Maxwell in lieu of Howard. I know the warrants may not support a three-way stop at any of the intersection local streets, but you may want to consider stops. Just a thought. Okay, John, that's good feedback. And generally, when we do go to put in a stop sign, it's our traffic operations team will go to that intersection and do an observation where they're like counting the number of vehicles that are going through and like looking at, well, how many gaps do other vehicles have to get through? So there are like some qualifications that would need to be met to add stop signs to specific locations. But I can add a note here to reach out to our traffic ops and ask them to do some intersection analyses. Because like I said, again, we'll be out there and now is the time to make any changes we want to see. John, if you have like particular streets in mind, you can message them to me and then I can ask for those particular streets of our traffic operations team. Let me make this note. Okay, and then I also want to note that Howard would likely have speed cushions and not speed bumps. There are some differences between those. Speed bumps are when they span the entirety of the roadway, like it's one big, bump across it. Speed cushions generally have like a wheel track through them, and there might be 3 across the roadway. And so larger emergency vehicles with a really wide wheelbase can straddle those speed cushions, and we don't impede their response time to like fires or emergencies. Whereas normal passenger vehicles are still going to have to slow for those speed cushions. Okay. Mariah, Escalante would be a good 4-way stop sign investigation. We'll write down Escalante. John, understand the process. Warrants, traffic calming. Okay. John, also a side note, a cat was killed a week ago on Howard near the sign of the cat crossing. That It's very sad. Yeah. Okay. Willow, thanks for adding those links to the webinar chat for everybody.
Thanks all for coming. I think seems like it's mostly wrapped up here with questions, but as Catherine mentioned, you can email her anytime or call. Email's probably preferred. I put Catherine's contact information in the chat, so you can grab that there, but it is also on the Howard web pages. And we'll get the link to the presentation up in case you want to share it with anybody or revisit anything.
Yes, please share it. Please share this with folks. I know I'm super excited about this project. I know it's been kind of a long time coming, so I'm just stoked that it's moving forward again. Hopefully getting built ahead of, you know, the kids going back to school in a couple years. And yeah, I live up on River Road, so some of those streets are like dicey to walk on sometimes.
All right, y'all. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. Willow, I'll leave it to you to close this out here.